During all this time, I had this desire in my heart to start my own business. I already had a really good reputation at Meta, so I felt good that if I wanted to go back, I would have a lot of people backing me up. My biggest lesson from my entrepreneurship journey is to sell before you build. Being an entrepreneur is really hard. It takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of mental capacity. You work weekends, you don't have any holidays, so it takes all of you to succeed. When I considered what I wanted to achieve in the next 5 years, I decided that employment might be a better fit for me. I actually found this 0 to 1 opportunity within a big company that I mentioned, which gives me the sense of ownership, which allows me to work on a really innovative product, and that was almost a no-brainer for me.
Hi everyone, welcome to Shameless Careers, the podcast about building a career you love. Today's episode is for anyone who's ever wondered, should I start my own business or stick to a stable career? What does it really take to build a company from scratch? And should I take VC money or bootstrap? And what happens when a startup doesn't succeed? How do you pick yourself back up and decide what's next? My guest today, Anna Buldakova, has lived through all of this. She built a career in product management at Meta, took the leap into entrepreneurship to start her own venture-backed company, and after an intense journey of scaling, pivoting, and ultimately closing the business down, she is now back in the corporate world, but this time with a whole new perspective. Anna is also a member of the Forbes Technology Council, the founder of a thriving product management community of over 40,000 members, and a public speaker on topics like future of work and AI. Anna, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start with a bit of a scene setting. Can you tell me, before you left Meta to start your own company, what was your role and what type of business did you start afterwards?
Yeah, so I've been in product management for over 10 years. And actually before that, I was in journalism for another 10 years. So I had a few pivots before I pivoted into entrepreneurship. And I think during all this time, I had this desire in my heart to start my own business. I always had this interest to create something from scratch. And to be honest, in the past 10 years, I've always experimented and tinkered with different ideas. I even launched a business, which was back in Russia. So essentially, this business was an art subscription. So a person would subscribe and every month they would receive a box with art supplies and an art lesson. And after that, we also, my husband and I, my husband is a software engineer, and I'm more on a product management side, design and go-to-market. So we made a perfect couple, and we experimented with a number of ideas, which never got launched. And now, reflecting back on why we never launched those ideas, I just feel it's just lack of experience, because we always were afraid that something would go wrong. Someone would, think about our idea and consider it stupid, or maybe we just won't find any users. So there were always some fears that prevented us from going to market. So when I was at Meta, and it was COVID, I came up with this idea that a lot of people around me have been looking for a mentor. And as I had this product management community, that was a perfect place to launch this kind of program. When I came up with this idea, it was something very, very small, like a spreadsheet. So people would sign up in a form, and then my idea was to share a spreadsheet. And in the first day after I announced this in my product management blog, we had 500 people signing up. And it was quite impressive because it was a free program, we did not offer any remuneration. So I was quite impressed. And my husband said, you cannot just share a spreadsheet with people. It's not secure, it's not scalable, and obviously 500 mentors signing up is a really good sign that you will have more over time. So he built a chatbot in a few days, which allowed people to get matched with a mentor. So essentially, mentors would still fill out a very basic application in Google Forms. But then if you were a mentee, you would go to this chatbot, which would match you with available mentors. And in the first months, we had over 20,000 users, which was really amazing. I was mind blown. And another thing that was really helpful was that we actually started a community for mentors. And mentors were able to share their stories, like how they helped mentees, how they themselves benefited from being a mentor. And that was so inspiring to see that I forgot everything about my fears. I realized that that's my chance to do something really great. And we started building a proper platform. So based on this initial traction, we decided to do a platform for people which would have more functionality and which would enhance their experience in mentorship. And over time would become almost like a competitor to LinkedIn, but more focused on specific interactions. So for example, not just looking for a mentor, but also looking for an advisor, a consultant, maybe someone who could help you with your content creation or podcasts. So that was an initial idea. And after almost a year of building it on the weekends and trying to find some time to do this, I realized that it's like now or never. You should just go for it or leave it be. And that was my moment. So I decided that I'm in a good place to take a risk, right? So it's always risky and it's always kind of taking a bet on yourself. So I realized that it was a good moment from my career perspective. I had enough security and a good enough reputation to go back if the startup would not work out. And I took a leap.
And what advice would you give to people in your situation who may be considering leaving employment for their own business?
The market is very important and the current conditions are very important. So for us, when we started, it was the beginning of 2022 and it was a very different market back then. We still had a lot of capital on the market. And for example, for us, we did not have a lot of traction, but we managed to raise 2.5 million as a pre-seed. And it's quite substantial money in today's world. So if you want to raise money in 2025, then you already should have a working product. You already should have a good P&L and an understanding of how your business should work from the cost and revenue perspective. So this is a very different environment. And obviously you should consider different things when making this decision today compared to when I made this decision like 3 years ago. So for me, I would say there were a few factors that I considered. So the first one, I already mentioned this one, being able to go back if a thing would not work out. Less than 10% of startups actually raise the next round. So the chances of building a unicorn are minuscule. And also, like, even if you want to be in the game for a long time, it's still like really a really risky bet. So you need to feel quite good about where you're at right now, and you should feel secure that you might not have a lot of money and you might not have any promotions or progressions in the next few years, and you should be comfortable about that.
And is there any way to check it somehow, whether you can go back? Or is it just purely based on your sense of your industry, where you work and your particular role?
I would say it depends on where you're at in your career today, because if you just transitioned into a new career, you are a junior person, you're just starting out, then in this case, it might be a bit more difficult to go back just because the competition among juniors is much more intense than among seniors. Like in today's market, even among seniors, we have a really difficult competition. But for juniors, it's just a bloodbath. So if I were a junior or if I just transitioned into a new career, I would feel a bit more hesitant about doing this kind of leap just because the current market is not really favorable. So for me personally, I was already a people manager. I already had a really good reputation at Meta, which I built in the past few years. So I felt good that if I wanted to go back, I would have a lot of people backing me up and welcoming me back. And also I felt that I've been in product management for over 10 years at that point. So in this case, I would be able to find at least some job and be helpful to other people through some other activities. Because I've been mentoring, I've been consulting people, I had a few corporate clients as well. So I would survive if my startup would not work out. So I would say it was quite a well thought through decision from the financial perspective, because obviously when you do a startup, it's a huge jump in terms of your salary and your compensation.
Yeah. So you've mentioned a couple of things. The first one is before going into entrepreneurship, right now in the current market, you need to already have shown traction. You said that you need to check whether you can go back and on which terms. What were the other criteria that you wanted to talk about? Because I remember there was something else.
Yeah, for me, it's important that I feel passionate about the idea I'm working on. So you should consider that your startup would take 5 or even 10 years before you can call it like a proper business with millions of ARR. So you should feel this inspiration to work on this for a long time. And being an entrepreneur is really hard. Like, it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of mental capacity. You work weekends. You don't have any holidays. So it takes like all of you to succeed. So if you don't something to hang on to, it's just a really difficult journey and you might burn out really quickly. There was this really interesting research by Sifted. They surveyed the founders and they found that almost 85% of founders consider themselves depressed or deeply burned out. And it's just a very sad figure, but I mean, just having been in this situation, I understand where it's coming from. So if you don't have anything that is kind of helping you to survive through those difficult times, I think you just won't have any protection. So for me, it was really important to feel this inspiration from the idea and to feel that I'm building something valuable and meaningful for people.
And let's touch upon how to find a business idea. A lot of people struggle with this aspect. Can you tell me what are the tips or potential resources that people can use to discover an idea for themselves?
I would start with some pitfalls. I think a lot of people look at themselves as a target customer, and they always think, okay, I have this problem, so maybe I will come up with a solution, and then somehow it will be a good business. But this rarely works. So that's why in product management, we have a lot of tactics on the user research and understanding the problems, segmenting the market, and understanding how it's growing to understand if this idea can actually lead to a good business. So I think there are a few things how you can de-risk this. So the first one is to, obviously you can start with your own hobbies or interests. There is even this part of the economy is called passionpreneurship. It means that you build a business around your hobbies or around what's interesting to you. And in this case, for example, you are interested in hiking or you are passionate about reading books. And you start with some assumptions. Like, you start with an assumption that, for example, as a book reader, I want to have an app to track all my books. And you need to understand if its idea actually resonates with other people as well. So if you just start building this on your own and you don't talk to any people, you might just build something that is valuable for you, but won't work for anybody else. And what's even more important is you won't build something that people will pay for. A lot of ideas might be good on paper, but people are not willing to pay for them because they have much cheaper and much more available alternatives, or they are already using something that works for them. So in this case, it's always worthwhile to start with going into a community. So for example, you can join a community on Reddit where you have other book lovers, or you can join a Facebook group or some other forum where you have a lot of people like you. And by being an active member of this community, you can actually better understand if other people experience the same problem. And in this scenario, you'll be able to, first of all, observe from the sidelines if people talk about this kind of problem, but also you'll be able to become their loyal friend and they will trust you. So in a situation when you already start building this product, you already would have a focus group, like a test group, with which you could test your idea. So that's a really great scenario for like a bootstrapped business where you are just starting from your own hobby, from your own interest, and you build a business around that. I'm actually a big believer in this model. I think that if you're building something that you yourself are passionate about, you can build something truly amazing because you care and you pay attention to details. And it's interesting for you to talk to all those people who are as interested in this topic as yourself. But then there is also a second path. It's when you focus more on these high growth opportunities. And those type of businesses are typically backed by VCs. So in this scenario, you actually need to not just to understand whether people would pay for the idea, but also if the market is growing. Because if your idea is great and you have some segment or some niche of people who would pay for this, but the market is shrinking, in this case, you won't succeed as an entrepreneur because essentially market would die and no VC would invest in you. That's what's been happening, for example, with the media business. I actually have been advising a startup which built an amazing product for media, for publishing houses. And they had really strong retention. People were ready to pay for it. But, you know, media is in a tricky situation right now, and the market itself is kind of unstable. So in this situation, it's a really difficult call for VCs to invest in this idea because they are looking for like a 100x growth trajectory. And that's not just dependent on how good your idea is, but also on how the market is growing. So in this scenario, you also need to analyze what's happening on the market. You need to understand the CAGR, the trends, and other aspects of how the market is evolving. And for this, you can use such tools as just market analysis. There are many industry research firms which create this analysis for you. But also you can take a look at different kind of tools which provide you analytics, like SEMrush, Sensor Tower. You can use them to collect initial analytics on how the market is evolving.
And we'll touch upon the difference between building a VC-backed business versus bootstrapped business. But before we go there, so at this point, this person has found an idea that they want to work on. When it comes to analyzing the business model, its sustainability, is there anything that they should bear in mind before they start building the company?
My biggest lesson from my entrepreneurship journey is to sell before you build. Even if you haven't built a product yet, try to sell it. Try to talk to your target audience and see what's their responses to your pitch. Like if you don't see them in this mood, like just take my money and give me the product, then it's probably not the idea you want to spend your time on. Right now, consumers are overwhelmed with choice. And businesses as well. Like businesses are in this era of efficiency, so they're trying to cut costs as much as possible. So if you're not building something that is essential or something that is solving a real pain, then you are just giving them a vitamin. Like, do you know this notion, painkillers versus vitamins?
No.
It's actually a really nice one. So it's just differentiating those ideas which are solving a real problem, and we call them painkillers. And people are ready to pay for painkillers because they are in pain, and it doesn't matter to them how much it will cost if it has any side effects, because they just want to get rid of the pain. But then also you have vitamins. So vitamins, in theory, they can make your life better. Like you can get shinier hair or, healthier teeth or something. But it's not a necessity. So it's like an extra thing you might afford if you have this extra money, but it's more of a nice to have. So when you are trying to understand whether to invest in this idea, your time and your money, you need to understand if you actually are building a painkiller or a vitamin. And ideally, it should be a painkiller. So ideally, it should be something that solves a real problem for people, and they are ready to pay for the solution to this problem. So that's why selling is super helpful, because it's an ultimate test to both the problem and the solution. If you are building without selling, and I actually saw this happening so many times, you come up with so many additional features and additional things that are not actually needed, and you delay and delay and delay your launch because you fear that it would fail. It kind of doesn't give you the right information, and you spend too much time on this. You are launching this too late. So that's why my recommendation to any founder of any business is not to build. Building comes second. You should first try to talk to people, see how their eyes ignite when you talk about this idea and your solution, and ideally even just try to sell to them, even if you don't have the product. I will give you one example. So I used to work in a startup when I was back in Berlin. So it was a product for hotels. Essentially, it was a tablet that you would put in a guest room, and guests would be able to communicate with concierge, order some spa or some room service via this tablet. But when founders decided to build it, they did not have either tablets or software or anything at all. They just built a prototype on iPad. So they just took an iPad and they created a keynote presentation which looked like the experience they wanted to build. And they went to 3 hotels and they said, hey, here's how it might look like in 3 months. Would you like to sign up for this? And yes, they signed up. They said they committed to a contract, and that was the initial money that they used for the development. And that's the approach that I would highly recommend, because it not only gives you the confidence in your idea, but it also gives you the audience, which can give you a really great feedback to build quickly and to iterate on your initial idea.
You've mentioned that consumers now are spoiled by choice, and companies as well, for that matter. What if someone has a fear that everything that was a pain is already solved? What would you say to those people?
I mean, there are always
new pains.
Yeah, I mean, I think ChatGPT is a great example here, right? So search problem was solved by Google. There were many other ways to search for information, but then we've got Perplexity, we've got ChatGPT, we've got many other AI-based tools which are helping with the same problem, but they are doing this better. So when you identified the problem you want to solve, the next step is actually to do this competitive analysis. And I think it's extremely important, because if you want to pull someone from the product they already use, you need to be very clear on what your USPs, unique selling points, are. Because if you're just doing the same, which is already on the market, like, people won't understand it. Like, for example, I already use Google Maps. Why do I need another app to find some locations and to find a path from one location to another? You need to have a really good story and a really good answer to provide to your people. That's where I really like this jobs to be done framework, because it helps you to analyze user needs from push and pull perspective. So push is something that is pushing them towards your product. And that can be something about your solution, like you're doing it differently, you are providing some extra functionality which is missing. And it also might be about the price. At the end of the day, people care about how much they pay for solving their problem. There is also pull. Essentially for pull, you also have a lot of forces that pull people to the existing solution. And even if you don't have a direct competitor, there are always some, if the pain is huge, then there is always a direct competitor. Like, for example, Excel is usually, in a lot of cases, is an indirect competitor to many of the products. Like, for example, there are a lot of financial planning apps, and usually a spreadsheet is a very good competitor. And similarly, for example, for Netflix, your competitor might be Coursera, because it's about how you spend your extra time, like how you spend the time which you're not spending on some essential activities and work. So you always should consider a broader picture, and you should understand what properties, what features attract people in how they solve the problem today, what makes them stick? Because obviously, and with some products, it's always a pain, you need to overcome this cold start. Like with some products, we discuss this app for book lovers. You might need to add all your books to this app for it to become really useful. Or in some cases, you might need to provide a lot of information, like with Apple Health. You need to accumulate some data to be able to gain some useful insights. So when you already have been using this product for a while, you would have a lot of and more of such forces, which will make you stick, even though the functionality might not be ideal. So that's why it's really important to understand that, and also understand how you would differentiate and why this would kind of overcome this bias for staying and not acting. One other important aspect I would highlight is this innovation theory. So the author of Jobs to be Done, Clayton Christensen, also shares this theory on how you should enter a highly competitive market. And in this case, you should always identify a small niche of people who are underserved by current solutions. So for example, you have Google Maps, and Google Maps serves a really huge audience. But for example, there are people who might have some issues with eyesight. And this audience might be underserved by Google Maps. So what you can do is to build an app specifically for them. So you will go very deep in understanding their needs and their problems with Google Maps, and you would build a solution which is specifically targeting this audience. For Google Maps, it's likely to be not a huge audience, and they are unlikely to build something that would target just this particular niche. But if you are building this product, then it will give you the initial audience to start with, and then you'll be able to expand your product to some other niches afterwards.
And let's go back to the question of VC-funded startups versus bootstrapped startups. If I'm a person who is deciding between these two options, how should I think about them? What are the pros and cons of each approach?
So for me personally, being a first-time founder in a VC-backed startup was an incredible experience. I think it gives you clarity in terms of how business should operate and what are the fundamental structures you need to put in place. It also gives you this extra push to work extra hard and to focus on a really ambitious vision, which is really an inspiring work that you're doing. I think that it's important to understand the dynamic that you will be entering when you do a VC-backed business, because VCs are aiming to create unicorns, and they want your business to grow not just 10x, but like 100x, 1000x. And this needs to happen quite quickly. So essentially, when you are in this type of market, then you need to show some growth and achieve specific deliverables in a year and a half time frame. And that creates a certain pressure and a certain dynamic in your team and also with your product. So the decisions that you make as a founder, they would be different compared to a business where you can grow, in a longer time horizon. So this really affects how you approach just business operations. And I wouldn't say that they are directly comparable because I think they are very different types of businesses. Like, for example, you might start, a nail salon, or you can start a restaurant. And this is unlikely to be a VC-backed business because it just have a very different model and different expectations on how this would operate. But then if you want to build something really innovative, a rocket ship, which is going after a moonshot, then obviously you need VCs because you cannot achieve this kind of ambition without having a lot of money and being able to attract the best talent with this money. So I think when you're choosing between the two, I think you should start with your idea first and what it is you are trying to achieve, and then think about the ways available to you to do that. Because I think both work and both are amazing and they can give you really amazing experience. It just depends on what you want to get out of it.
And let's take an example of a business idea that could technically fall in both categories. So not a nail salon or not like an ultra rocket ship startup, but some tech business where you can actually weigh these two options of funding between each other. You've mentioned that your business decisions and product decisions will be affected by funding. Can you tell me a bit more about this? So I have this product. What implications on my business and product decisions will one funding route versus the other have?
I will give you an example from my founder friend. So he's been building a product for sports. And given that he built a VC-backed business, he needed to grow very quickly. And that means focusing on a broader and larger audience from the get-go and trying to build a product that would work for millions of people in that particular niche. And he failed because when you are in this kind of environment, you have to take risks. And the bigger risks you take, the higher the chance you'll fail. So that means that you are making some of the decisions which haven't been done before. So you cannot just copy and paste. You are operating in a very complex environment and you have to shoot for the stars, essentially. And approximately in the same time, his friend, he also was building a product in sports, but he focused on a very specific niche. So he focused on elite athletes, and for a VC-backed business, it was a very small niche. But at the same time, now it's a unicorn company, but it took like 15 years, which is typically longer than for any VC-backed business. So it's very different. And I think even though their ideas were very similar at the beginning, they had different ambitions as founders. So that's why I think it always makes sense to start from yourself and try to understand where you see yourself in 10 years. Are you ready to fail? Are you ready to face all those complex decisions and take big bets? Or are you mostly looking to grow something sustainably, slowly, maybe not hire 20 or 100 people at once, but add one by one and be very considerate in that regard? So I think it's probably the most important question, because typically when you start, your idea is very vague. It hasn't gone through a reality test. It hasn't clashed with reality. And for example, with our idea for a mentorship marketplace, which we started with, it could go either way. Like it could be defined like a unicorn company. It could also be just a sustainable business. And we actually have a number of competitors doing both. And I think it mostly depends just on yourself. There are no other criteria. And you can always tell a story about this vision becoming something huge. And you can always tell a story about this just being very small and very niche. I don't think there are any other criteria there, at least at the beginning. Because obviously, when you've already been in this for like a few years, you already got some traction, you already know what works and what doesn't, and that gives you much better confidence in what kind of money you could potentially raise or get, and from what kind of sources. And that's why typically pre-seed is easier than seed or Series A, because at the pre-seed, you have nothing, and you only have the vision that you can sell, which can become a huge thing. But then seed and Series A, they are much more tactical. They are already about the traction and specific metrics that you can show for your work. And any good VC will immediately grasp the potential of your business from those numbers.
And let's go back to the point you have mentioned around the different market dynamic that VCs are facing right now. Can you tell me what type of businesses do they invest in at the moment? Because surely this should also be a consideration for you as a founder as to what type of VC market is happening at the moment.
Yeah, I think in general right now, VCs are investing in a more risky ideas, like more big bets ideas. And that was something where they started 40, 50 years ago. That was an initial premise of a VC-backed business, where you are trying to go after something that has a high probability of failure, but also a high reward if you succeed. So over time, as the capital became more available, it went to less riskier businesses. So essentially, VCs were able to invest in some businesses which were not doing something revolutionary, but had the potential to grow and to achieve something. So now I think we are back to the basics. And from what I see happening on the market, you should be one of the two. So either you're doing something really revolutionary, so deep tech, biotech, quantum mechanics, quantum computing, anything like that would get a lot of interest from the VC, or you should be doing something in AI. But obviously, I think there have been so many companies building on top of ChatGPT or Claude and not doing something on their own, that there is also some caution on the VC side as well. So if you're just doing a wrapper around those models and that's just an additional layer which is not adding extra value to the product, then obviously it's not, it's not something that would work. You have to either build a new technology, so essentially a competitor to Claude or GPT-4, all those models, and that requires quite a lot of computing powers, or you are solving an existing problem with AI and differently. So for example, such companies which are using AI to create animations or to create movies. So this is a solution of an existing problem with AI. But if you're just sprinkling AI just to say that you have AI and you're an AI company, which is happening a lot, this just won't work.
So basically, if you're a founder and you don't have this revolutionary idea, whether it's in biotech or any revolutionary idea within AI space, it is quite likely that you need to bootstrap. Would it be fair to say? Or do you think there is any kind of reason and any benefit of VC money in that case?
I think you still can raise VC money if you are showing really amazing traction. So if you are building a fintech startup or a B2B marketplace or anything of that sort, and you have really spectacular traction and you want to become a unicorn, then in this case, there is a chance you'll be able to raise VC money, and you also will be able to grow quite nicely. But at the same time, I see a lot of founders who achieved this profitability and traction asking themselves whether they actually would need VC money, or they can just go on and play it on their own terms.
Without this pressure that you were referring to before of like yearly targets, etc.
Exactly, yeah. So I have a few examples of companies which took the initial seed from VCs, but then they quickly achieved profitability and decided not to play the game anymore. And they are growing quite slowly. They are not trying to reach the stars. They are focusing just on one market, not trying to get all the users in the world to use their product. And that works for them. I know that it's not working for everyone. It's not a choice that everyone would make. But again, it's a choice. And it's something that you need to think about as a founder, because everyone would have a different mindset and different aspirations in terms of what they're trying to get out of the business.
Let's go back to your business. Can you tell me how did this evolve over time? You had to pivot. Yeah, tell me what happened.
Yeah, so initially we started with this idea of a B2C marketplace where people could find connections with other people, professionals, who could provide them with some support for money. So it can be mentorship, it can be advising, it can be consulting, anything at all. And we started with mentorship, and we tried to understand how this dynamic would work, what kind of traction we could achieve. Because when we analyzed the competition, and there were so many competitors at the time, they had a really good acquisition numbers, but the retention was suffering. So essentially, it was quite easy to advocate for mentoring people, and we actually got quite a lot of traffic from people signing up and saying, hey, I'm a mentor, just come and sign up, because everybody loves this kind of status thing where you can say, I'm a mentor, I'm a speaker at the conference, I'm a recognized professional, essentially. But at the same time, what we observed with competition is that after the initial session, people won't stick. So that was the main problem we were trying to solve, and we achieved really outstanding results there. So the retention on the product was really, really amazing. At the same time, we had this unfortunate market dynamics with layoffs starting, with people losing jobs, and not being interested in professional development anymore because their priorities changed. So instead of spending $300 on advancing your skills, you would rather spend it on preparing for interviews or not spending the time on those kind of activities, but rather spending it on work to keep your current job. So priorities shifted and consumers were not ready to pay for those kind of services anymore. We observed the same happening with a lot of our competitors. Like when we started, we had hundreds of them. And then magically, in just 6 months, more than half of them disappeared. So we started considering what we could do, like where we could go from that point, because we accumulated quite a lot of knowledge on how people learn and how people can connect with each other for a meaningful conversation. And we decided to go B2B. So B2B, especially right now in the VC world, is a much more predictable avenue because you're not dependent on the individual transactions. You can actually sign a contract for a year, and that gives you some confidence and predictability. So what we started building for B2B was essentially a version of this consumer offering, but within the company. So what we would do is would integrate with different HRIS systems, and we would get the feedback, the performance feedback that people would receive, and we would create a plan, a career plan for them. So what kind of topics they need to focus on to advance in their careers. And after that, for each topic, we would find them a mentor within the company or outside the company. Because apparently for many high-level people like a CTO or head of product, it would be hard to find mentors within the company. They would need to go outside. So this was quite a compelling offer. We signed a number of really great clients, but at the same time, all those contracts were about to start in 6 months. So we still had to raise the money. And that brings me back to my point about the market. So our B2B product was in L&D, learning and development market. And in the past few years, this market changed significantly. L&D function overcame really significant shifts. It kind of got merged into HR function or manager function within many organizations. Companies started to rethink their L&D budget. They are not as interested in helping people learn. It's this era of efficiency, so companies are cutting costs, and L&D in general is one of the first ones to experience the cuts.
Do you think it's just a product of a market cycle, or is that structural?
I think that's been happening in the past few years, and a lot of VCs got burned by this dynamic. So they invested in HR tech and L&D products when we just started in B2C. And then obviously with this kind of market dynamic of companies laying off people and focusing more on efficiency, they started cutting a lot of those tools. So VCs with whom we talked to about the next round, they were burnt by this and they just did not want to go the same route anymore. So there are two parts to this equation. So obviously the HR and L&D function changing quite drastically, but also VCs having this negative experience and having struggles in defending those ideas in front of their LPs.
Okay, so you needed more money until you had these new contracts coming about. So what were your options at that point, and what did you decide to do?
One of the best decisions that I made as a founder is being very particular about VCs to work with. So we were very lucky in our first raise that we had a few offers and we were able to choose. And I talked to many founders from their portfolios to understand how VCs worked with them in difficult situations. Because obviously it's very easy to be supportive when things are going well, but when things are going badly, that's where you can actually show your true nature. So it was very important for me to understand how those VCs approach those situations. And that's why we chose our investors. And I would say they've been incredibly supportive and helpful in the situation. We shared with them all our progress, so they were aware how things are developing. And we discussed the situation with them all the time. And I think we all aligned that it just did not make sense to continue. So that was a shared decision. It was something that we first discussed as founders, and then we shared with investors, and they were aligned on this decision. I think as an investor, you should be comfortable with taking risks. Like 1 in 10 of your startups would succeed, and that would cover the rest, which would fail or which would do like a normal job, which would be like a neutral, like getting into some revenue but not doing extraordinary. So you have this different types of startups, and you are okay with some of them, not working out. So I think our investors clearly understand that, and they wanted to support us as founders through that point, because I think it's not just about your first business, it's about the second and the third, and typically you become a successful founder not from the first try. It's typically like second or 10th attempt which becomes successful, because when it's your first time, you spend so much time on just figuring out the basics. I mean, even like HR or legal stuff, or like how to hire people in different jurisdictions, how to handle contractors, how to approach sales negotiations. Like all of those things are new to you. And obviously you learn incredibly fast, but at the same time, you're still new. So you are making a lot of mistakes. So I think it's important for investors and for founders as well, that they're not focusing just on this first business, because there will be a lot of ideas and a lot of businesses. And it's important for them to be there with you when it's your second or nth business. And at this point, you actually come to them and you build a successful business with them.
And taking stock of all the experience of running the company versus your employment in the past, how would you describe the key differences between two lifestyles? And let's talk about day-to-day, emotional side, financial side, so that someone who is choosing between these two options know what really these two options look like and how do they compare.
I will talk about my perception, but I also will highlight that it really depends. Like, for example, financially, given that I work at Meta, the compensation is much, much better than in a startup. When you are in a startup and you are a founder, you want to increase your runway. So you start from a very minimal compensation. And obviously you have quite a big share in company's equity, but it's worth nothing if your company is not there anymore. So you take a big financial risk. But at the same time, for example, when you proceed to Series A, for example, or Series B, you can start having a good enough compensation. And for some people, especially compared to just non-fund companies, it would be a good enough compensation. So it really depends on what you're comparing here in terms of options. If you talk about work-life balance, again, you can have a really bad work-life balance at Meta, at any other company, just working nights and days, working weekends, working during a sick leave. And similarly in a startup as well, you would have really intense no life, no balance experience. So for me, for example, coming back into employment, it was kind of this additional peace of mind that I have more people around me which I can rely on. So it's a decreased buzz factor. Essentially, I'm not the only one responsible for the area. And it means that even if I'm working really hard and a lot of hours, I still have people that I can rely on if something happens. In a startup, it's not an option, at least at the early stages. You are on your own. And given that you have, 6 people, 15 people, you don't have a lot of other candidates to do this work for you. And sometimes it's really urgent and it needs to be done. So you have to power through, even if you have cold or even if you really want to take some rest, it's not an option. So for me personally, work-life balance is much better when you are employed. Just, even if you don't compare the actual hours, but just the ease of mind and the peace of mind. It's just much better when you are employed and you're also not responsible for all those people that you hired because, as a founder, I felt the direct responsibility for all those people. And then if you talk about just the satisfaction from the work and the sense of accomplishment, I think you can achieve both, in both worlds. Obviously, in a startup, like when you're building your own business, you have much more sense of control and sense of ownership because that's your baby. You've been building it from the ground up and you've been pouring your soul and heart into it. But the same can happen with the corporate world as well. Obviously, you won't see this being built from zero, and that would affect your perception of ownership. And also, you would have much more people around you who own different parts of this experience or the product. And again, this affects your sense of ownership. But, in a different size company or in an environment where you are given a lot of responsibility, you can achieve that. So, for example, in my current position, I'm almost in a startup environment where we build a product from the ground up. And I do feel a lot of ownership and responsibility and a lot of satisfaction from that. So you can find those opportunities, but you need to be looking for them. Because when you are a founder, this kind of comes as a default option. You kind of are a default owner and there is nothing you can do about it. And in an employment, you have to find those opportunities. It's possible you can find those companies and those teams in which you can do that, but it requires some work to find them.
And as you were thinking about your next step once you have closed your business, how did you think about going into a new venture on your own, going to a big company versus joining a startup, for example? Because I know that this is something that you have considered.
There were a few options that I considered. There were 2 options related to being an entrepreneur. So the first option was to start a new business. And to be honest, I wasn't ready for this. As I mentioned, it's important for me to feel passionate about the area. And also the market right now is quite specific in terms of what kind of idea to back. So I was hesitant to jump into it straight away without any reflection, any time to just take for myself and to be able to reflect and to come up with an idea that I would really believe in. The second option related to entrepreneurship was solopreneurship. As I have a blog and a product community, I could continue building on top of that. I have a few products already which are quite financially successful. I'm mentoring and advising a few companies, so it's a B2B clients. So I could go on and could build this as practice as well. But it was important for me to also balance the risks and also my personal goals for the next few years. So when I considered what I wanted to achieve in the next 5 years, I decided that employment might be a better fit for me. So when I started thinking about employment, I considered joining a startup as a CPO or like head of product, or going back to Meta or any other large company. And I initially wanted to go into startups So that was my initial option. I thought that it would give me the acumen in the business, better understanding of how successful startups operate, and maybe just give me inspiration for my next move. So I started interviewing and I even got a few offers. But then I realized that in this environment, I probably won't get the founder skills. It still would be really focused on the product side. And also it would depend quite a lot on the dynamic with the founder. Because if you don't have this initial chemistry and it's not working out, then you might just find yourself in a very toxic environment. And it will just, kill your mood and your vibe, which is not great. Another factor that I considered was work-life balance. And what I found was that essentially in a startup, being employed, you would have pretty much the same work-life balance as being a founder. So to me, an option of being a founder was much more compelling than an option of just being employed in someone else's startup. And at the same time, I actually found this 0 to 1 opportunity within a big company that I mentioned, which gives me the sense of ownership, which allows me to work on a really innovative product and to develop a lot of skills that I want to grow. And that was almost a no-brainer for me. So I would say that I was quite lucky in my choice because I got this opportunity which was really relevant to my goals for the next 5 years. And also it provided me with the satisfaction and the sense of ownership over the product. But I think it really depends on what kind of options you have, because the market is quite tough right now, and sometimes you just don't have a variety of options to choose from. So you need to decide on what's really important, like what things you can sacrifice and what things you want to hold on to.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Anna, for being here with me today, and good luck on your journey ahead.
Thank you so much.